Hey friends, welcome back. This week I found inspiration from a legendary San Francisco restaurant known as Than Long. This restaurant became wildly popular for a garlic noodles fusion dish that Chef Helene Ann created. As soon as I heard about this dish, I knew I wanted to try it because I am a huge lover of garlic noodles and it's a dish that's budget friendly. And this is just a short list of the chefs and magazines that featured this recipe. All the chefs tried to recreate this dish on their own because, of course, the original recipe is a much guarded secret. And what's so interesting about this dish is that it's a fusion dish. So think Italian garlic noodles meets Asian noodles. And for this dish, we'll be using spaghetti noodles. Use whatever kind that you like, but I'll be using Barilla. And one of the chefs used green onions in her version. And I think it's great because they'll help to cut the richness of this dish. And of course we are using garlic, and I'm modifying this recipe because I'm cooking for myself, but I thought 3 cloves would work out fine. I'll be using some butter in this dish, but obviously that is optional. If you don't have it, you can still make a very delicious dish just with regular oil. Now for the Vietnamese twist. There is a lot of discussion about what the optional extra ingredients to these garlic noodles are. But some people use a combination of these, but soy sauce is an item. We also have some oyster sauce, which I will not be using today. Oyster sauce is another great condiment to have on hand. If you guys remember, I used a vegan oyster sauce to make this chow mein dish, and that was so good. I paired it with tofu, but you can use this with chicken, pork, hamburger, really anything, and it makes a super inexpensive meal with just some spaghetti noodles. And I think I used some celery and onions in this, but it was so delicious. But for the version of garlic noodles I'm making today, I'm not going to be using the oyster sauce. And then some people like to use fish sauce in their garlic noodles. My sons like this a lot in their food, but I am not going to be using that. And then we also have what many people call the secret ingredient, which is Maggi seasoning. And how you pronounce this depends on where you live. But here in the US, they usually call this Maggi. In other countries, it's Maggi. At first, I wasn't going to do this because I couldn't find this anywhere. And then I spotted this at Walmart, and I was supposed to get the regular Maggi seasoning. But as it turns out, Jugo is very similar. One is soy-based and the other one I think is wheat-based. If you can find the other one, then use that one. Otherwise, just use soy sauce. But I'm kind of on the fence about whether to use my regular soy sauce, which is a low-sodium kikkoman, or the Jugo. So I'm going to give these a taste test and see what I think. The low-sodium kikkoman is one of my favorites. I use it daily. It's one of those condiments I just can't live without. And as you can tell, the Maggi seasoning is very thick. And it looks to be very, very rich. It's much blacker than the soy sauce. So I'm going to try that first. And yeah, that's very salty, but very umami. And I'm a lover of soy sauce. The soy sauce almost tastes mild. Next to this, I'm a little bit concerned about the saltiness level. I think I'll go ahead and use just a small amount of the Maggi, but if you only have soy sauce, then just use that. The recipe at Than Long does have Parmesan cheese in it, but there are many garlic noodle recipes that do not, so if you don't have it, just leave it out. And then in terms of garlic, I'm going to be using both granulated garlic and garlic cloves. If you have garlic powder, that will work even better. This is a very garlic heavy dish, so if you are not a big garlic lover, this is not a dish for you to try. Lots of different chefs use a ton of garlic. I think that Chef Kenji Lopez used like 20 cloves of garlic in his. Chef John from Food Wishes used 8 cloves in his. And I think both of those chefs were making 2 serving sizes each. So that was a lot of garlic. And Chef Lan Lam, which is the chef whose article in Cooks Illustrated I was reading about, she's also a chef for America's Test Kitchen. She was using a combination of fresh garlic and garlic powder. I'm just going to be using granulated garlic because that's what I have. Obviously, if you don't have fresh garlic, you can also just use either garlic powder or granulated garlic. It'll be just fine. And I'm sure we're going to get lots of flavor with this garlic. Okay, you saw me trying this in my mortar and pestle. I was watching Kenji Lopez make his, and he had a stone mortar and pestle, and that worked much better, but mine is kind of soft, so it didn't work as well. I'm just gonna chop this into tiny bits, and then I might throw it back in. He was able to get kind of a paste with his. It really doesn't matter. Just take the easy route if you want. It's gonna be wonderful regardless. And like I said, so many different chefs are making this and putting their own spin on it. You just need to make it the way that works best for you. And one of the chefs even took the butter and separated the whey solids from it. And she said that that would help the butter prevent it from burning. But I was thinking to myself, you really need to cook the garlic at kind of a lower temperature anyway. You have to watch it so that it doesn't become bitter. So I'm not going through all the hassle with the butter. And then the other two chefs just used regular butter. But yeah, as with any recipe, you can be as simple or as extravagant as you want. I guess it depends on your mood and the day of the week too, how in depth you want to go. And I'll be using a shallow pan to boil my noodles in. You see me do this quite frequently, and the reason you do this is because it helps to increase the amount of starch in the water, and the reason for that is because there is less water in the pan. And then we'll use a little bit of that starch water to add into our noodles to make a nice thick glaze. And I do love the idea of using green onions with garlic noodles, just because it's gonna help to give it a little bit of a freshness, because garlic noodles are going to be very rich. And I just think this is going to be so delicious. And I'm only going to use the green ends. I noticed Kenji used some of the white part, but I don't think I want to do that. I think I just want to use the green ends. And the reason I keep telling you what the different chefs are doing is so that you can realize how much you can experiment with this recipe. And I am not salting my water for the pasta this time because I think that there's going to be enough salt in the butter because my butter is salted. And also I've got that salty Maggi seasoning. One thing to remember when you look at food blogs or recipes online is that you can find so many different manifestations of the same recipe, and that's because each person kind of makes it their own and then republishes it as their own. And this can work in your favor, especially when you don't have all of the ingredients for the original recipe. You can find lots of variations just by reading through many different recipes for the same dish. I grabbed these cooking chopsticks, but it looks like these are not from the same set. I'm just trying to make sure that the noodles don't stick together. Obviously, you can use pasta fork or also just some of these tongs, which I use quite frequently as well. And my goal for the noodles is just to have them al dente. You can also use egg noodles. Egg noodles are amazing because they're so chewy, but you have to be careful when you buy egg noodles to make sure that they're truly egg noodles, because egg noodles are yellow, but a lot of times they'll put yellow food coloring into noodles and they'll look like egg noodles, but they're actually not. You need to read the ingredients. And normally egg noodles are sold fresh, so you'll find them in places like H Mart. But egg noodles do have a special chewy texture that, again, if you wanted to upgrade this dish, you could do that. And this dish does call for Parmesan, and sometimes people use the grated Parmesan, but one of the chefs uses these pebbles. That's the only way I can really describe them. It's a little bit bigger than if you were to grate it. So I was just trying my best to find a way to get that consistency, and I think I have found it. So now I'm going to go ahead and start with my sauce. I think going forward, if I were making this recipe, I would either just make it with oil because I don't usually have butter on hand, but I do know that butter adds a distinct flavor profile to this, so I would probably use oil and butter, and then that would cut down on the amount of butter that I have to use. And then I'm adding about 1/4 of a teaspoon of granulated garlic, which is supposed to be garlic powder, but this is what I have, so that's what I'm using. This is going to be very garlicky. And then I'm going to add in the Maggi seasoning, and I'm only going with a 1/2 teaspoon because I'm a little bit worried about the salt level. But I think the other recipe had a tablespoon for 2 servings. And then I added some starch water from the pasta in here, and this just helped to make a sauce. And my kitchen smells so amazing right now with this garlic cooking. And you can watch the sauce here and see how quickly it is absorbed by the noodles and just makes a nice coating as I'm stirring this and cooking it for just a minute. It just gets thicker and thicker. And I don't want a real saucy garlic noodle, so I'm not going to add any more of the pasta sauce. But if you like yours a little saucier, then go ahead and add it. But I forgot that this last chef that I was looking at, she added just a touch of sugar to the sauce. And so I ended up adding that in at the last minute, which wasn't ideal, but that's fine. The idea is to play around with this recipe and make your own personalized garlic noodle recipe that you love. And I added in some Parmesan cheese here, which is going to thicken this up even further. You can just use the shaker if that's what you have. You can also make this without the Parmesan. Lots and lots of garlic noodle recipes do not call for Parmesan. But the different cultural ingredients like the spaghetti and the Parmesan cheese, and then either Maggi or soy sauce, and you could add some fish sauce if you want. But these are the ingredients that make this a fusion recipe between Italian and Vietnamese. And then I'm sprinkling just a few of the pebbles on top. I can already tell that this has the exact texture and sauciness level that I'm going for. I'm very familiar with this because I have had a lot of garlic noodles in Asian restaurants, and this is what I'm used to. The noodles are cooked perfectly, and it has that rich garlic flavor that I love so much. And just the small amount of green onions that we added to this dish really adds a lot. However, I can't believe it, but it wasn't salty enough. So I had to add a little more salt. I guess I was so worried that I was going to have it over salty. I had read some of Chef John's comments on Food Wishes about how his was a little overly salty. And so I was afraid also to add some salt to my noodles when I was boiling those. And also I was a little too timid on the Maggi seasoning. I think I should have added more. So I'm definitely going to be perfecting this. These are great on their own, but they're also delicious when you start to add in different proteins. And since I had the green onions, I decided to try them in another spaghetti dish that I made where I just chopped up one tomato that I had to use. I added some cheese and some olives and of course garlic and starch water, and this was delicious. I wouldn't have ever thought to add green onions to this dish, but because I had just tried them in the other dish, I was willing to experiment a little bit, and it just added another delightful flavor to this. I made another spaghetti dish later in the week, same situation, except for this time I was out of tomatoes and I found some zucchini in the fridge, and this was also delicious. There are so many inexpensive meals that you can make that start with spaghetti. The trick is just learning to get the seasoning right, which is basically just salt and garlic. But once you get the seasoning right, then you can add any ingredients into the mix and it's going to taste great. Thanks so much for watching, friends. I'll see you Sunday.
Morning has broken, my windows are open. Wanna feel the wind blow through my hair. Which way do I follow? What happens tomorrow? I turn to you and hope you can guide the way. Sometimes I give up, just wanna be on my own. Even in the darkest times, you give me hope. So